How do you lease a car the right way and get the best possible deal? That's what we're going to find out. Welcome to Car Help Corner, where we help you, the consumer, master the process of car buying and car ownership. If you're curious to know everything there is to know about leasing and how to get the best possible lease deal, this video is for you. As a consumer advocate and a professional consultant who helps consumers with their car purchases, I'm going to break down everything there is to know about leasing. But before getting into it, a huge thanks to OMVIC, Ontario's vehicle sales regulator, for sponsoring a portion of this video. So let's start things off by explaining how leasing is different from financing. When you finance a vehicle, you're making payments based off of the total purchase price. Leasing, on the other hand, is a little different. With leasing, you're only making payments on a portion of the total price. This is how leasing gets you lower monthly or lower bi-weekly payments. So if you purchase a vehicle that, say, has a total out-the-door price of $40,000 and you lease it for only 2 to 3 years, you're only going to be making payments on the first $10,000 to $15,000, which means that at the end of the lease, you have a balance to pay of, say, around $25,000, or you can just return the car back to the dealership. And this is why leasing should not be confused with renting. It is absolutely not renting whatsoever, because you are still paying off or paying down the vehicle. The only thing is that at the end of a lease, you have the option to pay the buyout, the balance of what you owe if you want to keep the vehicle, or you can return the car back to the dealership. It's your choice. But either way, you are still paying down the vehicle, which means it is not renting. So who is leasing for exactly? Who is the perfect type of buyer for a lease? Well, first off, it's really designed for someone who is a short-term person, a person who plans to own the vehicle for a short-term period, roughly between 2 to 4 years. Someone who just likes to have a new vehicle every few years and change into a new one, and someone who doesn't want to be concerned with having to spend money on repairs and worry about depreciation, because you're only owning the vehicle during the warranty period and then you're giving it back. This is why leasing is ideal for those who plan to buy a more higher-end luxury vehicle, which are typically known for having more expensive repairs and higher depreciation out of warranty. And leasing is perfect for luxury vehicles for this reason. Leasing is also a great option for business owners because lease payments can often be deducted as a business expense, which can save you a lot of money. And leasing is also really good for those who plan to buy an electric vehicle. There are a lot of phenomenal lease deals available out there for EVs, especially across the US. And leasing is a great way to ease into EV ownership without having any long-term concerns about depreciation, expensive repairs out of warranty, or being stuck with an electric vehicle that has outdated technology that's going to be replaced by something newer and better after a few years. And that brings us to the next part, which is how exactly do you know if you're getting a good lease deal on a vehicle, and how do you negotiate the best lease deal possible? Well, there is a very important rule or rule of thumb that's important to keep in mind when evaluating any lease deal. It's often called the 1.25% rule, which is something that a lot of brokers use. Basically, you're comparing the lease payment to the total MSRP of the vehicle. Anytime you have a total lease payment that's under 1.25% of that vehicle's MSRP, that's considered a good lease deal. And anytime the payment is under 1% of the MSRP, well, that's considered an excellent lease deal. So if you're purchasing a vehicle that has an MSRP of $40,000, a good lease deal would be a monthly payment of $500 per month all in, and an excellent lease deal, that would be around $400 per month all in. And this is again why electric vehicles across the US are extremely popular with leasing right now. Around 80% of EVs in the US are being leased because there are phenomenal deals out there, many of which have payments that are well under 1% of the MSRP, which is a deal that for many is too hard to ignore. Say, for example, you're buying an EV that costs $40,000 and you're able to get a lease payment that's around $300 per month all in. Not too uncommon in the US right now. Well, that means you're only spending $3,600 a year to own the vehicle. And on a 2-year lease, that would be $7,200. Not a bad amount to spend for a brand new $40,000 vehicle. So how exactly do you negotiate the best lease deal? Well, I've already mentioned part of it, which is you really have to keep an eye out for incentives and which types of vehicles are more incentivized for leasing. Look out for lease rebates or lease incentives, which are quite common with a lot of electric vehicles at the moment. And you also have to do some negotiating on your own, negotiating the total out the door price of the vehicle. Just like with any other type of vehicle purchase, whether you are paying cash, financing, and in this case, leasing, you always negotiate the total out the door price and try and get that price as low as possible. Make sure that you're not paying for any unnecessary fees, any dealer add-ons, and negotiating a really aggressive, good dealer discount. Because when you get the total price as low as possible, that will ensure that your payments, whether you're financing or leasing, are also as low as possible. I'll put a link up in the corner to a video on how to negotiate the best deal when buying any type of vehicle. You also have to consider the interest rates. Now, interest rates are not negotiable on brand new vehicles. These are typically posted on the car manufacturer websites, but it's still good to go on the manufacturer website and see what the posted interest rates are for a vehicle that you're interested in. If it has incentives of say 1.99% for leasing versus 4.99% for financing, well, that might be a vehicle that is a better option for leasing. And I should also add that in the US, you may be given a money factor instead of an interest rate. And if that's the case, all you have to do is multiply the money factor by 2,400, and that will tell you what the interest rate is on the lease. So if a dealership, say, gives you a money factor of 0.001, multiply that number by 2,400, that gives you an effective interest rate of 2.4% for the lease. Now, it's important to understand that borrowing money to buy a vehicle comes with risks attached. So here's some helpful tips from OMVIC to keep in mind. If you contact your financial institution, ask about your credit score and the financing options that are available to you based on your score. And know that if the dealer is arranging financing, they may submit your loan application to multiple lenders. So make it clear that you do not want your credit to be checked by multiple lenders, as this can negatively impact your score. And to protect yourself, ensure that you know exactly who your application is being submitted to and ask to see each lender's offered terms and rates. You should also check to make sure that all the information on any credit application that a dealership is submitting is 100% accurate. And when you're finally closing that deal, make sure to read the purchase agreement extremely carefully, again, to check for accuracy and make sure that any verbal promises are there in writing. To learn more about your consumer protection rights and to access free car buying resources, just visit the OMVIC website. More information can be found in the description below. Now, getting back to negotiating the lease deal, once you have negotiated the price of the vehicle that you're buying and are happy with the payments, you now have to consider a trade-in vehicle if you have one. Now, you want to make sure that you're getting the best trade-in value possible for your vehicle. And if you want to know how to do that, again, I'll put a link to the video in the corner on how to negotiate the best deal for a car, including how to negotiate the best trade-in value for your car. And once you've done that and you have come to an agreement on what your trade-in value should be, that amount needs to be deducted from the total cost of the lease before sales tax. And again, that's going to bring down your lease payments. The other pieces that you need to decide when leasing are the length of the lease term, the down payment, the security deposit, and the mileage allowance. Now, normally when you're leasing, you should be leasing a vehicle for between 2 to 4 years. Ideally, the lease term should be 24 or 36 months, 2 to 3 years, but 48 months or 4 years at the absolute most. It's never worth it to lease a vehicle any longer than that. If you plan to do that, then you might as well go with financing. And when it comes to the down payment, having the smallest possible down payment, ideally no down payment, is best for leasing. All you accomplish by making a down payment on a lease is bringing down your payments. You are not saving any additional money. And in fact, you may be putting yourself at risk, because if a vehicle that you're leasing happens to get written off in an accident and then the insurance company is going to pay off your lease, well, your down payment is essentially lost. You're not going to get that money back. So do not make a large down payment when you're leasing. Zero down is always best. Instead, what you might want to consider is to make a security deposit. This is especially true if you're leasing a more high-end vehicle with a higher price tag. You often have the option to make a security deposit, say around $7,500, and that's going to effectively bring down your interest rate on the lease, which is going to save you money and lower your monthly lease payments. The beauty of a security deposit, though, is that you get that money back at the end of the lease. So you're saving money and you don't have to spend any additional money on the lease. All you're doing is you're lowering your interest rate and getting the money back at the end. So definitely go with a security deposit. And the last piece that you want to consider when leasing is the mileage allowance. Now, typically the average mileage allowance for a lease is roughly between 10 to 15,000 miles per year, or roughly 16 to 20,000 kilometers per year. You can go with whatever mileage allowance is best for you. If you don't do a lot of driving and are not going to put a lot of mileage on the vehicle, you can go with a lower mileage allowance and save yourself a little bit of money on your monthly lease payments. But if you know you're going to do a lot of driving and you just want to have that buffer or safety net, then definitely go with the higher mileage allowance. Make sure to keep in mind that if you do go over the mileage allowance, you are going to have to pay a penalty. Typically, you're charged a fee per kilometer or per mile that you go over your limit. So make sure you're going to stay within your limit and you select the appropriate mileage allowance for your lease. Now, when you're wrapping up your lease deal in the business office or the F&I office at the dealership, just like any other type of vehicle purchase, the dealership is going to try and sell you all kinds of additional products and add-ons. Now, most of these products are really not necessary for leasing, especially if you plan to return the vehicle at the end of the lease. But there is one product that you might want to consider, which is lease protection or a lease wear and tear pass. This is essentially going to cover you for any kind of light damage or light excessive wear and tear that you put on the vehicle, such as any dings or scratches that you don't have to spend money on when you return the vehicle back to the dealer at the end of the lease. If you're able to get a really good deal on lease protection, say around $700 to $1,000, and that's going to cover you for any kind of damage that's put on the vehicle, well, I think that's worth it, because paying for all that stuff yourself can really add up and cost a lot more than that. Now, how exactly do you end a lease, and what kind of things do you need to keep in mind when that lease is ending? Well, it really depends if you plan to keep the vehicle or if you plan to return it. If you plan to return the vehicle back to the dealership, there are a few charges that are important to keep in mind. The dealer may charge you a small administration fee and also an inspection fee to inspect the vehicle and make sure that everything is okay with it when you return it back to the dealership. These fees should only total to around $300 to $400, no more than that. And if you are being charged or asked to pay, I should say, very high fees or charges when returning your car at the end of the lease, make sure you shop around. You do not have to return the vehicle to the dealership you bought the car from. You can go to another dealership and see whether they're willing to give you a better deal and charge you fewer fees or lower price fees when you want to return your vehicle at the end of the lease. Now, if you plan to buy out the vehicle and pay the full buyout, well, same situation. You're going to have to pay for an inspection fee to make sure everything is okay with the vehicle. And then you have to be prepared to pay the buyout balance in full. Now, typically you cannot finance the buyout through the dealership using the manufacturer financing options or interest rates. You have to finance the buyout on your own by going to your own bank or credit union and securing your own loan or line of credit if you want to finance the buyout. Something to keep in mind for the long term if that's what you plan to do. So there you have it. Those are essentially the important tips and things to keep in mind if you are thinking about leasing. Hopefully this video was helpful, and if you did find it useful, make sure to like and subscribe. You can also check out my other videos by clicking the links up in the corner. You can follow me on Instagram, and if you need any additional car buying advice, recommendations, or help with getting a great deal on your next new car purchase, make sure to visit carhelpcanada.com. Thanks so much for watching, and see you next time.